Good morning, I'm Kara, and I'm going to start us off. We're going to work together here. All right. And I'm going to start off the presentation by just showing you a really quick, short clip. We're not going to go too far into why the behaviors are happening, like function and all that. But I want us to kind of keep in mind that it's not just, oh, because they have ADHD this is happening, or because they have autism, or because they're diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. This kind of goes into kids that are not special education. I'd say you all are seeing that, aren't you? We have a lot of students coming in with a lot of carrying in, regardless of disability categories, regardless of background. And this kind of just gives a really skim of the surface of that. And then we'll go through with some interventions that you could possibly use. Let's see. This is one of those hyperlinks. I think we have to click it here. This is what it was doing a while ago to us. Technology never works when we need it to, does it? We may have to switch to Tiffany. Why is it doing that? It did that a while ago. It's like it just, does anybody know anything about Mac? It was doing this to us a while ago. It just disappears. There we go. Yeah. Can you guys hear that okay?
Hello and welcome to Teachings and Education. What are some of the many reasons that students misbehave? Is for attention. Some students act out in a way to get a quick laugh from their peers. When they act out, the teacher rewards them with attention. Any type of response from the teacher is a form of attention. The second reason is that they follow group behavior. If a few students are fooling around in the class, to quickly find another handful of students to join in the chaos. What you have here is a ripple effect. In this instance, students don't really know if the rules that are being broken are actually going to be enforced, or they don't even know what the rules are to begin with. Number 4, the battle for control. You'll find that in every classroom, there's going to be a student that constantly challenges your authority. They misbehave for power, or simply because they feel as though the teacher doesn't have a right to tell them how to behave. Your students may misbehave simply because they don't feel like doing their work. If students don't know how to do the work, or maybe they just don't feel like doing the work that particular day, expect to see them misbehave in a way that gets them out of doing any assignments. Number 6, students bring their problems from outside of school into the classroom. No one knows what the child is going through emotionally except for that child. Students come to class with baggage that often manifests itself as misbehavior. Boredom. Schoolwork usually isn't the most exciting thing for kids. You'll notice that the more boring the assignment, the more they'll misbehave. This is why it's important to provide engaging work. And lastly, their disability. Some students have behavioral disabilities, or chronic inattention, for example. In these serious cases, students might be off their medication, which will only make matters worse. Right now, I want to say thank you for your time. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Please like and share this video, and I'll see you again soon.
All right. See if I can get back off of that without messing the whole thing up. No, that's it on this one. Here we go. All right, so some of the common misconceptions that we're going to start with is that strategies are cookie cutter. You guys have probably heard that before, even in classes that we've taken in college. A student has ADHD, so you do X, Y, and Z. And all of y'all know that doesn't work. Strategies are determined by diagnosis. That goes along with that. You know, regardless, autism, ADHD, no diagnosis, ODD, a lot of those behaviors are similar. And that's what we really want to focus on. Treat the behavior, not the disability. And that's something as special ed teachers that I feel that we're more often than not working with gen ed teachers to really fully understand. Because I feel like if we can get that point across, a lot of our students are being placed with emotional behavior disorders or even other health impairment. We may be able to use interventions a little more effectively to help those students overcome that. And then I've got truth, individualized to each student. No two students are the same, that goes without saying. And then again, understand the why. Is it carrying? Is it because of ODD? Is it because they're off their medications? You guys know that there's all kinds of factors that come into place. All right, reinforcement versus punishment. When we hear punishment, what's the first thing we think? Bad. Punishment is not always bad, and when used effectively, it can be a very good strategy. However, we always want to use reinforcement first. The way I like to think of it, reinforcement increase the behavior, punishment decrease the behavior. And something too, it said in the video that they're doing so because of reinforcement. Sometimes we don't realize that when a student's wanting attention, what's the first thing we want to do? Please be quiet. I'll get to you in a minute. So guess what they got? They got reinforcement by wanting attention. And it's things that we kind of involuntarily do and don't even realize we're doing it. And it said, this is a reminder that we'll go over here in a minute. If we're going to use punishment, for example, there's a reward that the class at the end of the day gets an extra homework point if they do X, Y, and Z. And that student doesn't get that. So we're taking that away in order to decrease the negative behaviors, right? So if you do that, we have to give a replacement behavior because we can't just say, hey, don't do that, right? So let's say, for example, we have a student that, hey, Miss So-and-so, hey, Miss So-and-so, I want you to help me, okay? Most likely, what are they probably wanting? Some attention. So, because if they're trying to do their work, odds are they're not trying to avoid it, they're just wanting your attention. So a replacement behavior we might work with is something as simple as just saying, raise your hand and I'll get you. It doesn't have to be complex at all. All right, the big with reinforcement, and you guys know reinforcement is highly, highly encouraged. Something as simple as this PowerPoint, it has colors, it has videos, that's providing reinforcement to you all. The fact that there's water back there and we get thirsty, that's reinforcement to go get a water. It's in everything we do, right? As students have a lot of carry in, you say, hey, so-and-so, it's good to see you here. That's reinforcement for them to want to come in. This is from Dr. Rashay Reynolds. It really makes sense. We can't change the behavior that just happened, but we are impacting the future probability of that response in the same class. That just means you can't change the fact that they just got reinforced for attention. However, we can change the consequences provided in order to change if that's going to happen or not again, right? There's nothing we can do if it's already happened, but we can work to try to be proactive in preventing that. Again, reinforce the behavior, not the person, and that really just goes back to your behavior focus is physical aggression. Reinforce when they're not. You're not reinforcing Sally for the day. You're reinforcing the fact they weren't physically aggressive. Because Sally may be working on physical aggression and verbal aggression. So guess what happens? She might have had a great physical aggression day where there were no behaviors. She might have had a terrible verbal aggression day. And we say, well, we'll reward you if you have no physical aggression occurrences. So we end up rewarding the physical aggression and the verbal aggression performance, regardless if it's good or bad, and it gives false information to the student. So we would have a different goal. We'll reward this for physical aggression and this for verbal aggression. And it's amazing once I started using that concept, how different it made the classroom. All right, I'll let you look over that real quick. We handed up water. This is really big, I feel like. I don't know if y'all can see it very well. One thing that I feel like, especially when we are bringing this into the classroom in general, I've heard a lot of times, well, you're just bribing them. You guys have probably heard that. You're just bribing them, try to get them to do something. But there's a huge difference. Just like it says, reinforcement, rewards are earned, versus bribery, they're given out of a response. So say the kid's laying in the middle of the floor, kicking and screaming, and you're like, if you'll just get up, I'll take you to PE. We bribed them, right? If you go in and say, okay, you know what your plan is for the day, 5 stars to get PE, otherwise PE's not happening. That's not bribery. The kids haven't actually worked for that, and they know if they don't get their 5 stars, it's not happening for the day. And then, the reinforcement is planned ahead of time. And I think that's probably one thing that I struggle with the most, is that I know sometimes, especially you guys work on the fly all the time, and you have paraeducators that work on the fly all the time. But I feel like just taking the time to really sit down, you guys do behavior intervention plans, all of you all are special ed teachers, you know that. Really sit down and create a plan so that in the heat of the moment, in the middle of a meltdown and physical aggression, your plan never changes. Because when it does, in the middle of it all, it just confuses their students. All right, and there's a little link about this. We won't watch this whole thing though. I love the introduction to this.
So, you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to run my students to do something that they should already be doing. We sometimes hear that from teachers, and I have good news. Positive reinforcement is not bribery. Think back to the paycheck example. Do you consider your paycheck bribery? I sure don't consider my paycheck bribery. But let's consider the example of the little girl. She didn't get her sticker until after she put her name on the paper. So she's put her name on a paper, and I've given her a gold star sticker. Now, if I had given her the sticker and then said, okay, now go put your name on the paper, that would be a bribe. So there's a small difference here, but it's a big deal. So if the behavior happens before, the expected behavior, before they get their item, it's positive reinforcement. If the expected behavior happens after they get their item, it's bribery. And we are not talking about bribery today. It's all about positive reinforcement.
All right, so it just gives a little bit more. I like that little video. All right, so moving on. These are your different types of reinforcers, and some that are kind of unique that I often forget about. And Tiffany's going to go into these further on how they can be utilized in the classroom. Edible reinforcers, that's often great for new learners because they eat a chip, it goes away. As you guys know, sometimes when you give them therapy, you're my turn, and they're no, I don't want to give it back. However, if you give them an M&M or you give them a Smartie, it's gone. So there's no battle of power of saying you have to give it back. So I really like that one to begin with. Sensory reinforcers, swings, trampolines, tangible therapies, sensory toys, activity reinforcers first, then, and that's just if you haven't used those first, you write your name on the paper, then you receive your star. And a lot of students love those. And with more significant disabilities, pictures might be better. With more, I don't want to say advanced, that's not the right word. With less severe cognitive disabilities, words are very effective, I found, with those. And then social reinforcement. They really love positive praise. I mean, even as adults, we like it when our principal comes to us and they're like, hey, you did a great job today. That goes a really long way. And then a chance to see their friends. Let's say they get an extended break. This goes back to what we've kind of already discussed. Let's see. It talks about that it only happens after the desired behavior. And something else that I often find myself doing, you know, reinforcement is considered a consequence. Sometimes we think consequence is bad, but that's not true. Consequence is just what happens as soon as the behavior happens. I'm bad for finding myself, okay, the student, our goal is to stay in the seat, and they run around the classroom. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine, but you're not going to earn your token for the day. Did I take their token away right then? No. Later on, I might have done it, but the effectiveness of it goes away completely. It goes away. Let's say that a student does very well with their writing skills that day. And I say, okay, you'll earn your sticker at the end of the day. Well, that's delayed reinforcement. That kid most likely has forgot why they even got that sticker. So that's one thing that I really, really encourage, especially paraeducators, is very frequent and very common, I guess, always the same reinforcement, because eventually you're going to be able to taper that off. Right, and I just like this little quote. The way positive reinforcement is carried out is more important than the amount. We reinforce the behavior the wrong way one time, that takes away 10 ways of doing it the right way. Yeah, I see you shaking your head. You've been there before, and it seems like the student always remembers that they got a sucker even though they punched somebody that day. It seems like that always happens, and it happens to all of us. But that's something I try to keep in the back of my mind, especially on the hard days. I have to keep that consistent reinforcement. And reinforcement, again, is just to increase the likelihood of the behavior. Reinforcement isn't to take away the fact that they're punching somebody. It's to reinforce the fact that they didn't. And I think that's sometimes where we talk about the bribery and reinforcement. No, you're not punishing them necessarily for physical aggression. You're reinforcing the good behaviors in order to increase those and eliminate the bad, the negatives. And then here, if you go over after this and look at our chart or our board, you'll see different examples of this. And you guys have the barcode and stuff. You can look this up. I'd say all of you all would use this. Pretty much all of these at some point in time. And two, I didn't focus a lot on punishment because, again, we hear it, our first thoughts are negative. However, that is not always true. It can be used, especially if reinforcement is failing, and that happens. It seems like that happens a lot more commonly because there's little follow-through at home sometimes, and I find myself, I don't know about you all, reinforcements are very hard to find, right? But not punishment is, I'm going to take a break. That's something that we all try to avoid. Or, you're not going to get your extra 10 minutes today. Punishment of if, okay, the class earned your homework ticket, you didn't, because you still took away and you're decreasing that negative behavior. So don't always think punishment is bad. And then again, replacement behavior. If something's negative, we have to teach them a positive instead of just reprimand. And that's who, you guys don't have to read that to you. Just the big thing that I've actually most recently learned more of with the replacement behavior, if they are wanting attention and your replacement behavior is giving them a homework assignment to get them out of something, the reason they're doing it is to get attention, and you're giving them something to avoid a task that's not going to be effective because we're fighting against each other. So you want attention, you give them lunch with the teacher, something like that. So you want to match those. If they're wanting to avoid, that's when your homework ticket would be very effective. Two, we kind of already went on that. These are some different examples of reinforcement, and I focused more on elementary because I worked more with elementary, and she did more with the middle. I've got one of those over there, a little Caterpillar. I don't know if you guys have ever used those. I've got a 7th grader using the I Can Do It one. He's working for a pop every day, and y'all, I'm telling you, we went from meltdowns, throwing desks in the middle of the classroom to 5 stars every day. Something that I kind of questioned myself on because it does seem a little elementary. I took the Caterpillar away and gave him those charts. He loves it. And then Miss Navarez that works alongside of me uses a reward system, K8. They all love it. It's very effective for them. And then behavior books, I'd say all of you guys probably use that as something that, especially in a contained classroom, they can earn money to buy something. And then this is Tiffany. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, I'll be over there afterwards.
Hey, I'm Tiffany. I'm only gonna tell you this because it relates to why I chose this, but this is my 23rd year teaching special education. I know that ages me, but I want you to understand why I chose to focus on behavior strategies today. My very first 2-3 years of teaching was a hot mess. You know, screaming, I didn't know the strategies to use when I had students that had behavior issues in the classroom. Gradually, as we all do, you start learning some things and putting them in your toolbox. Then came this year, and we have had so many behavior issues in our classroom and in our school. And from what I'm hearing, that's not just my school, that's a lot everywhere. And so I had to start digging in and doing a lot of research, trying to find out what I could do. I was using all the things I've used all the years. This year it just was not working. So I was having to do all this research. A lot of my co-teachers were coming to me with, what do we do? Our newer special education teachers in the building were, do you have any ideas? So I decided this is going to be my focus for this year. I'm going to try to round up some strategies. Now, like Kara said, we're not focused today on the why. I feel like, you know, we learned that as special education teachers early on and through our years, how to look at a kid and, you know, study their behavior and figure out their why. This focus for me today is, these are some strategies that you can use. Here's your list. Here are some things that it's broken down. Like Kara also said, we're not focused on, this is ADHD, this is ODD, this is autism strategies. We're going to look at, here's the behavior the kid is exhibiting, and here's some things you can do. So now you may or may not have seen KVEC put out this wonderful tool. And this one specifically deals with challenging behavior. I use this thing, I keep it up on my computer all the time. And if you look down through here, it has it broken down by tiers. And if you look over here in this far column, it even tells you the behavior of concern. So that is where I'm going to focus today, is these areas of concern, these behaviors. And they have a lot of what I'm going to talk about already put through. So if you don't already have this link, you have access to our PowerPoint, and it is linked here in this PowerPoint. Now, I also took that tool and I created this spreadsheet. If you look up at the top, you see all of those categories that are in the tool that KVEC has. And if you look at the far left over here, this is where you can put student names. And for example, at my school, in our middle school, our kids have 5 classes a day. So on my version, this is just a generic version, but on my version that I use with my school, I use teachers' initials here where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or you could just count that as class periods. And for example, if Justin here was the first period teacher for a kid, he would put yes or no underneath the respectful, you know, the category here, and yes or no if they're exhibiting that behavior. So if we look at these sample students that I've put in here, you can see a pattern and kind of help you understand where you need to target your behavior strategy. If we look at John Doe here, he's only having trouble when it comes to breaking class rules. If you look at Sarah Doe, you can look across here and see she's only having trouble in second period. So you can investigate what's going on in second period. Or for John Doe, you can investigate and apply some behavior strategies related to breaking class rules. So let's start with breaking class rules. Here are some interventions. One of the most things that, or I've got level 1 beginner at the top of this. I want you, every time you see that slide that says level 1 beginner, that is something that is good to apply to the whole classroom. And it's going to be more preventative to help you stop the behavior before it even begins. Rules. You definitely want to make sure that your rules of your classroom, first off, that you have them, that they're visible for the students, that you practice them, that they're consistently expected, and you revisit them often. Now, I've put an example of what we use at Heinemann. There's this side, we have these in every classroom. We have a different poster that's hallway. We have a different one that's bathroom that's hung outside the bathroom. For all of our common areas, there are specific rules, and they all kind of follow the same format, so the kids know what is expected of them in each category, in each area. And that's something that's also important, is that the kids know what's expected. So now if you see level 2 intermediate, this is kind of when we move past those things you can apply to the whole classroom, and we're starting to target a specific student that's having issues. So now, something that I've learned through my research is if you look at, there's a woman, Josie Bensko, and she has a platform called Maniacs in the Middle, and she kind of came up with this Jolly Rancher award. And if you know kids, you know they'll do about anything for a Jolly Rancher. So she has this system that she uses, and I have started using it in my classroom, and it is a success. So you just, if you see the pictures there, you've got each class period identified, or you don't. She has. I've got it linked down here at the bottom, the Jolly Ranchers War, so you can get her actual printouts. But you can just do it on a whiteboard. And when you see kids, you have identified ahead of time what behaviors you're looking for, and you can just give them a point as a class. On mine, since I'm special education, I have all my students with their own area that they can get a point in. And at the end of the week, whoever has the most points gets a Jolly Rancher, and it does it. It helps drastically. But this link right here goes to her page, so you can get more information for that. So let's look at level 3. This is when level 2 hasn't worked and you need to get a little more creative. So number 1, you need to use other people as a resource, their parents. You know, most of the time kids are used to, you only call home if they're in trouble. Yeah, they've done something they shouldn't have, but like Kara mentioned with reinforcement and punishment, let's look at this as a reinforcement. We're going to call home for support. We're not calling home saying, you need to punish them. We want support. We want your help. Let the parent know what our expectation is. They should know from the IEP meeting, of course, but I'm sure they've forgotten. So remind them what the expectation is. Here's what we're trying to do. Can you help reinforce this at home? As Kara also mentioned, sometimes we have to use punishment. So if things aren't working, remove the student from the situation, not as you're going to detention, but more of remove them from being stimulated by what's around them. What if the situation is that they're overstimulated? There's something going on in the classroom that's causing that behavior. If we remove them from the classroom, then that stimulus is not there anymore, and we can have better control of the situation. Also, something that you can use is the check-in, check-out system. It can be used for so many different things. This is one that I got off of that payback tool. And you can change and edit the target behaviors on the side. I have used so many different target behaviors over there. And then you can see the class periods that you can also edit. And then they take this from class to class, and they can take it to their math class, and their math teacher will look at those target behaviors and just give them a 0, 1, or 2. And the key for what those mean is up at the top there. And the student is seeing, they're being able to monitor, and it's been communicated with them how that teacher felt that their behavior was for that target each period of the day. I have a student that started using one this week, in fact, and we added his check-ins in addition to his classes, and it's going really well. He's earning those points. They get points for each number, and then we have already agreed upon, you get this many points, you get this reinforcement. And then at the end of the week, or at the end of the day, if you need it more often, they can take it home and have their parent sign, and you're getting that parent communication in there too. Okay? And then you also want to work with the student on talking about what rules that they think that they will find difficult to follow, and make sure you make a plan for success with that. Develop those goals with the student. So now let's move on to defiant, disrespectful interventions. Our level 1 beginner strategies, of course you're going to talk to the student about what they were doing, tell them what the expectation was, remind them of that, and you also want to tell them how what they were doing did not meet that expectation. Again, rules, rules, rules. Make sure they're visible, make sure they're practiced, make sure they're consistent, and reinforce them. We all have our teacher look. Sometimes that comes in handy in this situation, giving them that teacher look. Make sure you keep eye contact with them, that you can see them, that they can see you, and you're using that proximity control. You want to use responsibilities that they prefer to keep them engaged in whatever they're supposed to, the task or assignment is. Our level 2, when a student follows a directive, you want to reinforce it. You can use tangibles or privileges or intangibles, praise them. You know your student, you know what's going to work with them. If not, you can use a course choice reinforcement survey to help you identify what will work for that kid. You can plan opportunities for them to be successful. You can use the behavior momentum, another KVEC strategy. It's linked there for you to use. And basically what that is you want to think ahead. What are things that you know the student will be successful at? You want to ask them 3 things that you know that they can do with success before asking them to do the thing that they've obviously had trouble with. You want to provide alternative ways for them to follow the direction. If verbal directions do not work for them, provide written, vice versa. You could provide a variety of ways for them. And you also want to break the directions into smaller steps so they're not overwhelmed by the huge amount. Level 3, when a student is unable to demonstrate appropriate behavior, here we go with the punishment again. Remove them until they can. There was obviously something going on that was causing it. Let's remove them from that. Call home, write home, use those parents as support. Think about, is the task too easy? Is it too difficult? Is it above the amount of time that they can focus? And then again, you can use the check-in, check-out system. You can have them self-monitor. I've got a picture there of a self-monitoring sheet. You can use something like that and talk with them about progress. Full attention and focus. I'm seeing so much of that, more so than anything else in our building. Is it COVID related? Is it, for us, the flood, trauma from that? I think it's a mix of those. But we're seeing a lot of it. And so this is where I'm using the strategies the most. Consistency. Those rules. Consistency. I can't say that enough. You've got to keep that consistency. You've got to be careful and mindful of what kind of stimuli may be affecting them. All those sensory stimuli, you've got to really hone in on that and see if that's causing trouble. Make Make sure they have the materials they need. Last week, I had a teacher come to me and say they could not control this student in the classroom. I walked over and observed the student for a minute. He wasn't writing anything. I walked over and I said, do you have a pencil? No. I went and got him a pencil. We started working. No more behavior problems. Make sure they have that, because a lot of times those students are shy like I was when I was in school, and they're not going to ask for anything, any support. Make sure they have what they need before they start. And again, that eye contact and proximity control. When the student is doing what they're expected to do, staying on task, or reaching out for support, reinforce that. If it is difficult to reduce those classroom sensory stimuli that may be causing the problem, use something like earphones. Start out, that's going to help block everything out. Now, they can't go out into the world and always have headphones in, so you want to gradually reduce that use after you start seeing some success. Provide opportunities where there is planned distraction for a short amount of time so they can start to become used to that. And then also you can break those assignments down into smaller chunks. If you have a sheet that they need to do 20 problems on, break that into 5 4-question assignments. Again, here's a different self-monitoring sheet you can use. Use those parents. Use those parents. Use them as a resource, not always to get your kid in trouble. Modify the size of the assignment so that it can take less time, and gradually increase that to where they're working with the expectation their peers have on them. Utilize small group instruction. There is less sensory stimuli in a small group. When the student is unable to maintain focused behavior, here we go again with that planned punishment, and remove them from the situation. Unmotivated. I'm sure you all have some students that no matter what you do, they don't care. Especially if you work with middle school like I do. Every type of reinforcement you use, they're like, I don't know. So this is some things that might work with them. Again, those rules. Maybe they're, I don't care, is because they don't want to look bad in front of their friends. So if they know what's expected, they don't have to ask that question and look bad in front of their friends. Make sure that they're involved in as many activities as possible that you know they will be successful in, so they can experience that success. Make sure you show them that you're interested in them. Work with them individually when you can. Talk with them. Just come up, how are you doing today? I'm glad you're here. Karen mentioned earlier how much of an impact that can make. That is a reinforcer all of its own. When they're showing interest in an activity, reinforce it. Do not involve them in competing activities. If the reason for acting unmotivated is that they're afraid that they'll look bad in front of their friends, you don't want to put them in an opportunity or a situation where they may fail. Plan the opportunities so that they can make choices when they're participating. And make sure to provide real-life activities. Explain that the student's level of engagement in an activity should be what it should look like, and how their current level of engagement is not meeting that expectation. Make them understand how what they're doing is not meeting that. When they show interest in an activity for the length of time they're able to, maybe they have some issue with focus. So you need to consider, if they're only able to focus for this length of time, don't have the expectation that you're going to reinforce be this length of time. Involve those guardians again, and incorporate their interest into as many activities as possible. Low and no work completion. You want to use that eye contact and proximity control. Give those directions verbally, in writing, any way you can find a way to provide those instructions to make sure they're understanding. Be very specific with what you're expecting. Ensure again that they have all their necessary materials before you ask them to begin the task. Think about if the task is too easy and they're just bored and don't want to do it because it's boring to them, too difficult, or beyond their frustration level. Go back to that, what we talked about earlier with the focus. Is something in the room distracting them? If possible, reduce it as much as possible. Have the student repeat what you had asked them to do back to you so that you're sure that they heard it and they understand. And again, break those assignments into smaller chunks. Are you starting to see that some of these things are repeated in everything? That's a definite clue that those are some good strategies that's going to work and you can put in your toolbox to have for everything. Have the student record when they complete tasks. One of the recording sheets that I've shown you today, for example, in the self-monitoring sheet would be a good place for that. Break time into work, break the time for work into smaller increments. If the assignment is going to take an hour, break it into 5 or 10 sections. Make sure that you follow something that you know they're not going to enjoy with something that they will enjoy. And this activity they don't enjoy is a prerequisite for the activity they do enjoy. And then also, sometimes kids they can't get started. They can't figure out what's that first word I got to put, how do I start this assignment? So give them an assignment that you've already started, or a peer has already started. That way that frustration level is off of them and they can see what's already been done, understand, oh, that's how I do it, and then complete it. Rules for emotional and anxiety. You want to make sure they understand what is expected so they're not worried about that they'll do it wrong. Pre-plan opportunities that they can be successful. Allow additional time. If you know it's going to take 30 minutes, give them 40. Don't tell them that it's supposed to be 30 minutes. Tell them it's 40. And avoid competitive situations with these folks. Think about, is it too difficult for them? Is that length of time not appropriate? Be aware again of that stimuli around them. Have them work with a peer or a small group. Engage them in activities that will help prepare them to begin an assignment. A lot of kids work well with, most kids work well with structure. So make sure their hands are on their desk, their feet on the floor, their eye contact is with you. So that is like a routine they can get into to make sure that they're ready for every assignment. Talk with the student about what expected behavior looks like in the situation and how that the emotions and the anxiety signs, that nervous sign that they're showing is not what is expected. When the student's showing signs of being nervous, remove them. Something's making them nervous. Get them away from it. Or reduce the amount of it if you can't get them away from it. Ask their guardians for support again. I would guarantee you that their parents are willing to help you with reducing that anxiety. And allow them to work on another high interest but calming activity before giving them something that you know may cause them anxiety. Tantrums and out-of-control interventions. I have a student in the 7th grade that he has tantrums. I hadn't had a student with tantrums in a long time, so this is definitely something I have to dig in and try to find some support for. So when he is in those situations where he's not happy and he's having a tantrum, you're not going to reinforce like she spoke about earlier. I'm going to wait till he's in a situation that I know that he is not happy and he acts the appropriate way, and then I'm going to reinforce it. I'm going to make sure that he is very aware of those classroom rules. I'm going to make sure that he knows that I am genuinely interested in him and how he's performing and how he's doing. And I'm going to encourage him to use problem-solving skills when he's faced with something that he does not enjoy. I'm gonna explain that I'm aware. I'm gonna recognize that I'm aware that he is upset. But let's talk about how you can appropriately deal with how you're feeling. I'm gonna think about, is what I'm asking him to do too difficult for him? And I'm gonna provide opportunities for the student to engage in both academic and social situations in which I know he can be successful. And I'm gonna teach him those methods that will help him deal with these problems when he comes upon them. And then I'm gonna establish with him how to reward him when he's dealing with those upsetting situations. And I'm gonna, like, today or this week, if you are faced with these situations and I see you handling them appropriately 2 times, you'll get a reward. And we're going to gradually move it up to 3, 4, and 5, so you want to gradually increase that number of expected situations. When he chooses to handle a situation that upsets him in an inappropriate manner, I'm going to remove him from that situation. There's something causing him to not be happy. I'm going to remove him so we can get him back on a level playing field, and then we're going to go through motions of discussing how we handle things. Ask the parents for the support again. They're not wanting to see their child have a tantrum. And explain that it's natural to be unhappy at times, but there is an appropriate way to handle that publicly. So now some of the resources that have been used today are right here. All of them are fantastic for, like, I use them, I keep them on my computer all the time. All of the links that I've included throughout the whole thing are things that I keep open on my computer all the time. They are so valuable. Also, there's more strategies that when you look at the PowerPoint at the bottom where the speaker's notes are, I included more strategies there. I try to keep it short as possible, but give you a sample of some that I thought were most beneficial. But if you need more, there's more there.